being able to show a really clean, professional report back to that customer, we've seen as much as a 15% increase in our close rate in most jobs.
All right. So, Patrick, we'll start off nice and easy. Can you just introduce yourself with your name and your title?
My name is Patrick. I'm the director of sales operations for Straightline Construction and Ramjet companies.
Awesome. So, tell me a little bit about your role. What do you do over at Straightline?
I have several roles. Director of sales operations. My main thing is I oversee all of our computer systems. So whether it is our full ERP system, anything where our CRM is set up in the system, where our sales reps are going to use that data to go out, run their appointments, come back, and then building any orders, tracking that, putting everything into the system. Our entire sales process from start to finish. I manage all of those systems as well as working with our call center representatives, and we're in 3 different states. So I support most of the technical training and sales training and the systems training for all of our locations.
Awesome. Give me a quick overview about Straightline Construction. I was looking at your website before this, saw you guys, like you said, are in a couple of different states. So, give me a rundown for folks that might not know much about you.
The elevator speech is we are family owned and operated. We started back in 1982 in Southern Colorado. The current owner's father started with a couple of individuals, and then he took it on by himself and built it into the company that it is today. About 10 years ago that Tim took over for his dad, and with his wife, Lauren, they run the current company that we have today. So we're, like I mentioned, in 3 different states. We've got 5 locations, but we specialize in foundation repair. So our reps are going to go out, they're going to meet with homeowners, they're going to review whatever damage or anything that they're seeing in their house at the time. We'll put together proposals and offer them some solutions. And then our crews are going to go out and do that work if the customer decides to go with us. We do quite a bit of commercial work as well. We've been on some really high profile projects, from completely underpinning the Wyoming State Capitol to putting in micropiles on top of Pikes Peak, one of the tall peaks here in Colorado, where they have a large observation center, and they've got these big decks that stretch out over the side of the mountain. We were up there for about 2-3 years putting micropiles in so that they could build those decks in a massive renovation that they did. And those are just some of the big projects that we've done.
That's awesome. That's some really big projects. You guys have your work all over these major places, and people might not even know. So that's really cool. I want to talk about your background a little bit. Obviously, I was doing a little bit of research on you before we spoke here today, and saw that you've kind of had an interesting journey into your role. So can you just tell me about your background a bit?
Yes, born and raised in Colorado. Went to school down in Southern Colorado at Western State, and then I got into sports nutrition for a time. Left that, went into mortgages, did that for 8 years. Met some really great people and learned quite a bit in the mortgage industry. And as we all know, the industry changes, goes up and down. And a friend of mine was working for one of the telecommunications companies here in Colorado, and said that knew of an open position. So I decided to change careers and worked for Quest for quite some time. They were bought out by CenturyLink. I ran a large channel there, worked with systems and everything, and worked with all those master agents. And then I jumped to a company. It was kind of a partner that we worked with at Quest, that was an online aggregator. So they sold TV, phone, and internet services through their platform, and they could qualify customers from any part of the country with the different service providers, whether it was Comcast, Xfinity, Verizon, AT&T, Time Warner, all the big dogs. So I worked with them for quite some time. Left and did some home sales for just a little bit, and that's where I kind of started getting back into construction and learned quite a bit being on site for home sales. I was fortunate enough to see the house from the contract phase all the way to where we broke ground, built the foundation, framed up the house, all the way to where we walked the customers through and handed them their key, whatnot. when we closed that sale. So did that for a couple years. And while I was doing that, ran into a friend from the mortgage industry, ironically. And he's the one who introduced me to Tim and Lauren. They needed some sales reps here in the Denver area. And home sales, I had to work weekends, and getting into foundation repair work, I got my weekends back. So that was one of the reasons why I jumped in there. So I was out in the field. I was running appointments for the first few years. I'd started taking on some leadership roles, and it was just a natural transition to where I moved in as a sales manager. And then we had made a decision to build out our own ERP system at that time. So I was kind of the likely candidate to lead that particular initiative. So I started working with the different developers, and over the last 5, 6 years, we've built out our own system. And so I kind of transitioned away. We brought in another gentleman to be the sales manager, and that's actually it was me and him who worked with the initial representatives with ArcSite when we first took that on. And so for the last 6, 7 years, I've been doing primarily all of our systems and helping to, I got our call center built out and launched, and built all of our systems. So the entire CRM process all the way through, and we send out that final bill, work with the developers to create that in our system.
That's awesome. You mentioned you've been kind of overseeing the ArcSite implementation throughout Straightline. So I want to rewind a little bit and talk about what was your workflow system like before you found ArcSite?
So it was very archaic. We would go out to the customer's home, and with uh, some graph paper and a pencil and tape measure, we would go through, and we need pretty not exact measurements. We need within a few inches. We need to know the dimensions of the house so that we know where to put the piers or any other type of elements that we're going to install in the house to repair that foundation. We need to know the exact dimensions of that particular house. And having without having a system at that time, we were basically just using, sketch pads and paper. We even had one guy who would just take a blank white sheet, and then he would just draw a nice little square, and then he would just write the dimensions on there. So it wasn't to scale or anything. We had some guys that would take it to another level and had colored pencils, and they would do shading. And so, I mean, we were spending at times, an extra half an hour to an hour just getting a drawing together before we even started putting any numbers or anything into our systems to build out a quote. So we had we had looked at a couple other systems to do some two-dimensional drawings to sketch out a house, but they were only used on a computer desktop or laptop. It wasn't something that you could use in the field, and they were very, very rigid. And just trying to draw a straight line, and get the corners to match up properly was a challenge in itself. And then if you wanted to take it a step further and put, where the power comes into the house, put any bushes that could be in the way, where the driveway was set up, getting everything to scale was a great challenge. So for years, we were looking for alternatives and had tried a couple of different things.
Totally. I think that, kind of like archaic process is sort of like where a lot of our customers start. And, paper, colored pencils, regular pencils, it's just very tedious to do that when you're out in the field and you're trying to engage with the customer. You're trying to also do the technical part of the job. So tell me about how you actually found and discovered ArcSite. What interested you when you first found the tool?
I don't recall exactly what the initial interaction was. I think it had to do with seeing something on LinkedIn, and it piqued my interest. And so I went onto the website, started looking at the different things that ArcSite would offer, and to see whether or not it was going to be a good fit. And when I found that, I mean, I personally was sold when I found that you could draw a straight line in the field with, with tablet or something like that. I was all in. But from that point, we had to build a business case and present it to the owner. So I got together with our sales manager, and the two of us started doing our own research. Jumped on the website. At that time, I think it was 2020 or 2020 when we first jumped in with ArcSite. So we were not one of the first, but we were kind of an early adopter. So we got in early on, and it was a match made in heaven for us. We had gone as far as to print the graph paper with 10 scale and putting our logos and stuff on it just to try to be a little bit more professional. And the very first ArcSite drawing that we put out was 10 times better than anything that we had ever hand drawn. So it was a big win for us. So the the initial conversations that we were having was just to give our guys a way to draw a digital diagram in the field and be able to present something back to the customer that was legible and professional. And the cost and stuff was not extravagant or anything like that. It definitely fit well with our scale and size at that time. I think we our initial purchase was for roughly 5 to 6 user seats on top of the admins to get our field staff, our residential field staff, armed with ArcSite. So we had another initial small investment to get some iPads to outfit the guys with iPads so that they had something to go out to the customer with, and kind of changed the way we did business. It definitely upgraded and modified our entire sales process.
That's awesome. Talk to me about the implementation process as well as the business case that you built, because I think a lot of folks that we talk to or that might be watching this are kind of in that similar position, right? They are intrigued by the tool, they want to build a business case for it. So, talk me through that. How did that all go for you?
Yep. We're just large enough that we have some mid-level managers that could actually, put something together and present it to Tim and Lauren, the owners of our company, to see if it was something that they would welcome, and if it the financially it fit into our model and everything. So um, once we got a small quote from the onset and were able to, show what we could actually do with it, we actually did some testing. I think both Ryan and myself got a test account. So I was able to, load it onto my personal iPad and do a couple of drawings and sketches just to kind of show Tim and Lauren, first off, what it could do. And even just being a novice, it was pretty user friendly to be able to draw out my personal townhome and get everything put together. From there, we just looked at, how many sales reps we had, what the subscription costs and everything were going to be, if there was any additional costs or any impact to having administrators be able to access that to pre-populate some of that stuff. So from that point, it was a really easy business case to write. Tim and Lauren were on board, so they went ahead and pulled the trigger for us to go ahead and start off. And once we made that commitment and signed the initial agreement, it was a pretty quick and fast process to get us on board initially, to where we were just doing simple sketches. But then we soon realized that there was so many more capabilities, and our sales manager Ryan took it to a whole nother level over the course of the next 6 months, and completely changed our sales process at that point.
Absolutely. Are you able to speak to that a little bit? Just tell me about how you kind of wove it through your sales process.
So initially, what we would do is our sales reps would knock on the door, introduce themselves to the customer, and they would walk around the house. And that part still kind of holds true today. But from there, they would go out and they would start sketching the house and they would start photographing the property. It was all done with pencil and graph paper at that time. And then once you came back into the house, we pretty much ended the sales process there. We would talk next steps, say, hey, I got to put all this information back into my system. And I will be in contact within a couple of days with a quote or next steps, whatever the process necessitated. Once we found that ArcSite actually gave us the ability to do some one call closes and do some quoting in the house, it was something that Ryan jumped on. So he started building out all the different shapes in the system. So our services, turning those into shapes so you could quickly drag and drop them onto the ArcSite drawing. We do, on top of doing the foundation repair, we'll do some concrete lifting. So whether it's driveways, garages, sidewalks, that type of thing, it was easy to actually, instead of just drawing it or dropping an image on there, be able to actually drop in the service and put in the square footage around where the driveway or sidewalks or that type of thing were. Some of the stem wall repair we do is just a linear foot. So, I mean, there was a lot of different options in ArcSite that allowed us to kind of build out some of our products into the system. And some of our sales process requires involvement from a third party engineer. So we're not able to quote everything in the house. But for the simple stuff like concrete lifting, doing stem wall repair, some of the other drainage and grading improvements that we can do, we were able to actually build a quote in the house and present that to the customer before we left. So it took away that extra step of always having to go back and present something for customers who are eager to, sign a quote or to help compete against our competitors that, are right in the door after us. Gave us the ability to present pricing and potentially get that job closed right then and there before we had obviously, kind of reduce our chances by walking away from the home without actually giving a quote.
Absolutely. Have you guys noticed any change in those like close ratio metrics or any of other like your business metrics because you're able to do that close on site?
The initial close percentage went up a few points, but what ArcSite allowed us to do, we took it to a whole nother level. So when it came to the simple stuff and being able to close in the house, we probably got a 3 to 4%, maybe even as much as 5% increase because we were closing there in the house. Especially one of our guys in Southern Colorado does a ton of mud jacking. Um, and so he's seeing, as many as 400 to 500 customers in a year. And he can get those quotes out before he even leaves the house and see if he can go and if he can close those. So he closes several hundred throughout the year, and those quotes can average from 1,000 to $5,000 on a simple mud jacking job. So it definitely helped him to be more successful.
Absolutely. I want to shift gears a tiny bit and also go back to talking about implementation and onboarding. You mentioned that you kind of had that initial onboarding process when you built that business case, but now when you bring on new reps or are hiring new staff on board, what is that training and onboarding process like now that you have ArcSite in your workflow?
The individual reps, we put them through some internal training. We've got our standard introductory training that we're going to walk those guys through. So it's going to, history of the company. This is what foundation repair is. Starting to introduce them to the terminology that comes with our industry. Helical piers and micropiles and all those jargon type terms. Then we're going to get them into systems training, and that's where I do a good portion of it, teaching them our internal ERP system and walking them through, how to manage their contacts in the CRM portion of that, how to build a quote out, and how to produce that service quote and send it out to the customer. We kind of use a team effort with the salespeople that are out there in the field. So we do some on the job training where we'll send that new sales rep out with the existing salesman, and they'll actually get a chance to kind of, share their tips and tricks on how they use ArcSite. And, part of the initial training is to have those new sales reps go out several times with our current reps, and they kind of take on that data gathering phase. So they'll start using ArcSite and they'll do the drawings, and then they've got somebody there who can, give them real time feedback in case they've got a question or, hey, I do it this way and it's more efficient. So they can get some they can use the product before they're actually having to think about all the other sales type activities that they need to do. They can focus solely on the program and learning that tool. They'll also go out with our technicians, who are probably the best users of ArcSite, because that's all they do is just go out and do drawings and put bathtubs in the right places and trees and that sort of thing. So we do a lot of that on the job training with them. Then when it goes on to the next phase where they're actually building bids in ArcSite, again, they're working with the other sales reps and getting tips and tricks. And then the ArcSite team's been phenomenal with the support that they provide. We worked with one of the representative, Patrick, who's super attentive. He's gotten back to us and helped us actually build out all the different shapes and getting those quotes built out into the ArcSite system and making it fast and easy for our reps and stuff to use it.
Well, that's awesome. Um, I want to shift gears now a tiny bit and talk a little bit about some of those like business impact type questions that I mentioned earlier. Um, Walk me through maybe just like a top line overview, like about just how much revenue do you all do per year, and have you noticed any shifts in P&L or revenue since you've brought ArcSite on board?
Well, because some of our competitors might see this, I will keep it kind of vague. Since we've started using ArcSite in coming off of the COVID years, we were building on our business. We're in Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico, and we've seen 100% increase, 200% increase in our Arizona markets. In Denver, we've increased by over 100%. Coming off of COVID, we saw a huge jump, and we did a lot in marketing that really helped to drive some of those new leads coming in. Um, but the benefit with our systems, with getting our ERP system in everything in one place, and then using a tool like ArcSite has enabled us to scale, for that increase in customers that are coming in, the number of appointments that we're seeing. We built our sales team from roughly, I think when I first started, there was only 4 of us. And now we've got a team. We've had as many as 10 sales reps. We've got 9 currently today that are out in the field. So we've been able to scale up without hiring a whole bunch of, management staff or support staff, because the tools that we have in place today with ArcSite and with our ERP system, we've been able to really take on the additional customer base and get those additional sales and stuff into the system, and be able to go out and see just as many, if not more, customers, because the tools that we have today are that efficient.
Absolutely. I know you guys do both like residential and commercial work, as you mentioned at the top of this call. For the commercial side of things, how has ArcSide implemented just the process of like getting in the door with those bigger players and also closing those deals?
So the commercial side of our business currently doesn't use ArcSight a lot, and it's not that the tool doesn't work for us. It's the nature of that type of business. We have a lot of general contractors, and we have a lot of if the process is different. So in a residential setting, a customer sees cracks in their house or they notice some damage, they call us and we start the process. So that's where ArcSite really comes into play, because we're documenting the house from scratch. In the commercial world, usually somebody has already gone out and done all that work, and they're coming in and they're saying, "Hey, here's the repair that we need. Um, can you guys do it?" And so we've already got drawings, we've already got engineering plans. So our guys aren't going out as much in doing the initial drawings. That's for the larger jobs. When it comes to some of your simple commercial jobs where we're doing polyfoam work, where we're doing concrete lifting, stem wall repair, drainage repair, we actually do have some of our commercial guys will use ArcSite to do those drawings. Where it's not a big thing where you've got a big contractor, architectural firm, or engineering firm that did all the, expansions or repairs or anything like that. If it's we've done several apartment complexes that needed concrete work done. And we draw those in ArcSite. We'll have a strip mall or something where the sidewalks out front are down and they need some work. We'll do that. I know one of the guys at a small condominium place, they were getting some water in by the front doors, and he used ArcSite and put the drawings and stuff together. So again, it gives us a nice professional drawing that we can go back to either an HOA or, a service company or, property management company. We can put together a really clean report and stuff in those cases.
Absolutely. In terms of also the some of that like P&L type questions, have you noticed any change to like your average contract value or average contract size in terms of dollar value?
Absolutely. We've seen probably 25% increase in the average sale. Um, and it's also not only is it giving us more money on those jobs, like I mentioned, getting out to see more customers. Guys are more efficient. And instead of one of our sales reps, you know, running himself ragged to try to get out to all these different houses and then come back and spend, 2, 3 days in the office trying to get his bids together and his bids out, he can actually spend more time seeing more customers because he's not spending as much time in his home office. So our guys are more efficient. They're not having to work as many overtime hours. They're still, quality of life is still there. And they're making good revenue because, they're seeing just as many, if not maybe, a 10% increase in customers without having to spend a whole bunch more time.
That's huge, honestly, because you're out there in the field, you've done a bunch of visits all day long, and then you come back to your office or your home office, and you're like, well, dang, now I got to do all the paperwork for everybody that I've seen today, and it's almost like another day's shift on top of the work that you've already done. So, in terms of probably life quality of life, work life balance, just like morale amongst the entire team, like everybody wants to do a really good job at their job, but also want to spend time with their family, do what they love outside of work as well. So it really hopefully is giving that sort of balance, which is very important to a lot of people.
Absolutely. And that actually brings up something, you talked about onboarding and stuff. When we first put ArcSite in play and we gave it to some of our reps, we've got some guys that are really savvy and they're willing to try anything and everything, any new toy or tech gadget or something, they're all over it. We've got guys on the other side of the spectrum where they just, aside from using their cell phone and just basic laptop, they're not really getting into much of that kind of stuff. So they were very hesitant when we first rolled ArcSite out. Um, and those first couple of drawings, I got the pushback. Oh my gosh, this takes me forever. I'm going to spend all this time. I'm not selling. But those same guys now are our top salesmen. The guys who actually are less tech savvy are the best salesmen that you have. And those guys are, they'll call me and they'll have a small little question, a tweak here, a tweak there, or something. But they're the ones that are doing ArcSite drawings and they're the ones that are quoting in ArcSite and doing those closes inside the house. And they found that with just a small little ramp up in learning the navigation through ArcSite, the different menus, it's actually really user friendly. It makes a lot of sense. They're able to actually do drawings faster than they could on their paper drawings and then go back and try to put everything in the system. They can get more bids out now, even though they're not as tech savvy. And they let me know every time something changes because it changes up their process. But that's another good thing about ArcSite is they don't make a lot of changes that really hampers their ability to do the drawings and stuff the way they've done. Anything that's been put in there has been an enhancement and has it. Nothing's been taken away.
Exactly. That's always the tricky thing with like when you're implementing new software, and especially for someone in your role, you want to find something that's like heavyweight enough to do everything that you want it to do, but not complex with that, so that your team takes forever to ramp up and understand what it is and not be a barrier when you're out in the field. It should just be like an extension of your brain. Like you shouldn't be having to like think about like, oh, how do I actually get around in here? Just you want to be able to do what you're coming here to do. If I had to ask you what dollar value impact ArcSite has had on your business, what would you say?
I can't give you an exact dollar amount, but I can tell you, I mean, our business, we've seen sales guys who used to be in that, $1 million range in sales. Some of those guys are as much as they've doubled that. They've been able to accomplish a significant amount more. And with the tools and stuff that we have today, and we've even got some additional enhancements that we're looking at that could potentially help, kick that up another percent or two. Because if anything, the market is getting more competitive. We've seen, some major players from across the country have come into our markets and snatched up some of the small mom and pop foundation repair companies. So we've got these big behemoths that are, spending all these different marketing dollars and they're getting celebrity endorsements from different people. So it's only getting tougher when it comes to the marketing aspect of it. So anything we can do to make it easier for the guys to sell is definitely going to help us to combat that because our industry is constantly changing and evolving.
Exactly. The more players that come into the market with, their millions of dollars of, maybe private equity funding or whatever it is, it becomes harder and harder to compete, right? Because it's almost like a bottomless pit of cash that they have. So I guess to that, like looking forward over the next 5 or 10 years, what all are you looking to do to like remain competitive and maintain your competitive advantage?
We've got a couple of things internally. Our ERP system was built out on more of a static on server type program. And Microsoft has taken those programs and stuff and moved them to the cloud. So as you've seen, a lot of things have gone to the cloud with that type of support. We're putting in the work right now to upgrade and automate our system So it's going to give us some additional capabilities. There's some integration stuff where we can pass information back potentially through Zapier and different programs like that, to where instead of having to key everything into ArcSite with customer name and address, we may actually be able to build out some integration. So I'm looking forward to that. We've got some other systems that we use that we're looking for a similar type of enhancement and update. In the next 5 to 10 years, marketing is going to be a big part of it. AI is definitely impacting our industry, not from the actual repair itself and what we do. Peers is pretty straightforward. How you install them is pretty straightforward. I can imagine that maybe they'll come out with some a little bit better equipment, that's more efficient. And even with the different environmental changes, you might you might see more equipment that's actually electric versus some of the gas powered stuff that we use today. So I could see some enhancements there. Systems wise, we're looking forward to some of the future enhancements with ArcSite.
Absolutely. And then I guess on like more of a personal note, like if you were to give advice to, maybe somebody that's up and coming in the foundation repair industry or somebody who's looking to get into a role like your own role right now, what advice would you give them?
If you're planning on starting a company, I would probably try to coach you against it, just as competitive as the market is gotten. Um, it's a fascinating industry, and one thing that I really love about this is you're not trying to, sell, puppies or flowers or anything like that. This is stuff that people truly need. And oftentimes, if we're working on their house, it's most of the time it's their biggest asset. So being able to go in and either recover a foundation that's settled or be able to stabilize a house in place to stave off any future damage, even help them to put their house in a position where they can do additions or enhancements or something like that to allow them to do that. We've done several crawl space to basement transitions. I've actually sold a couple of those myself, which was really cool because you could see an older farmhouse that was one of the ones up in northern Colorado sitting on a rubble foundation. And we put a basement underneath it. And so double the square footage of the entire structure, which was really, really cool to see. And the homeowners were super ecstatic after we finished stuff. But if that's what really drives you, then you'll be happy in the foundation industry and stuff coming in there. Somebody that's going to get into sales, make sure you understand, learn as much about the customer and about their homes as you possibly can. The more you can understand about that house, the better off you're going to be. Again, putting together those presentations, being able to understand how the house is constructed. I had a lot of advantages being with the home builder for a while and actually getting to see, where they dug the hole and started with the footings and put in the foundation walls and started framing. Being able to see the entire process really helps you to understand how to repair those homes when you're starting to get movement from one aspect to the other. So, do your research, make sure you understand as much about the home. It's not just about selling, there's a lot to this industry. And, even today, I've been here for coming up on my 11-year anniversary. I still learn new things almost every day. I go out to houses and see stuff I've never seen before. I mean, it's constant and changing.
Absolutely. That like kind of continuous learning throughout your career is so important. And especially with how fast things change these days, you're going to see something new, you're going to learn something new, and you're very much going to have to like keep that knowledge fresh as people go through their careers. And to your earlier point, yeah, it's such a impactful job to have as well, because everybody buying a home, it is probably their biggest asset. It's the biggest thing you've ever bought. And you hand over all of this money and you want to make sure that your home is safe and stable and going to last you the next 30, 40, 50 years. And then you hear maybe there's a crack, maybe there's something wrong. And that's like one of the most frightening things to hear about your biggest asset. So I'm sure there's a lot of trust and security placed into yourself and your team to be able to be like, okay, I can put my trust in these guys. I know that they're going to get the job done, and my biggest asset is going to be okay. As an aside question, I did want to quickly touch on the Ramjack piece of it. Obviously, it's like a patented system, but did the company always have that partnership, or was that something that came over the years?
No, Ramjack Foundation Systems actually goes back to, I think it's 1969. And it started actually in Oklahoma, more with pest control. And as you can imagine, going and doing pest control, whether it's termites or, you know, insects or something like that, you get right up and close to the foundation. And especially with termites, where they were seeing a lot of these homes that were being impacted by that, they started recognizing the signs and symptoms of foundation failure. So Ranjack then got into the design and put together some helical piers. And so Ramjack was one of the first companies. Actually, I think they were the first company in the foundation repair industry to get their pier system certified by the International Code Council. Several of our competitors have gotten their pier certified, but not the brackets and the other components that go along with it. Ramjack continues to lead the industry and has the entire peering system. They've also worked with the different groups that are doing seismic research, and we've worked with Cal Berkeley. They've got these huge shaker tables, 4 stories of basically dirt that's stacked on top of each other. And they use hydraulics to shake these things back and forth and mimic an earthquake. And then they see how the different foundation systems will perform. And Ramjack has sent piers and done numerous testing. And we are the first company. Ramjack piers were the first deep foundation elements that were approved for installation in California. There was a job that we did last summer where we actually, because of the size and scope of this, it was a project, and you can find the case study on our website. The project was an old boat manufacturing plant that was repurposed into a new film studio. So they needed to take out some of the middle supports. They needed to raise the roof, and they added additional loads onto a lot of the existing structure. So we went in and put in miles and miles of piers underneath this place and installed helical piers. Again, one of the first times that it was approved because of the nature of the system and how well they do in a deep foundation repair or new construction project like that. So back to the original question. Straightline started with doing simple mud jacking and foundation repair work, and they started using piers by another company, but then partnered. I want to say it was the late '80s that they partnered with Ramjack and became the distributor for Southern Colorado. Then took over Northern Colorado. I think it was around 2014. There was another Ramjack dealer up here, but Tim and Lauren took over that particular part of the country. They also took over Arizona when one of the other Arizona reps had moved out and went on to do some different things. And then they started from scratch, Ramjack, New Mexico. So we've got those 3 different states. And for residential, we pretty much have those territories where we're the only one who can install Ramjack piers in those places. And we use the Ramjack name in Northern Colorado and in Arizona and New Mexico. We use the Straightline name in Southern Colorado just because Tim, he's never had another job. He's always worked for Straightline because his dad started it, and Tim started work for his dad when he was, I think, 12 years old. So he's never known anything else, which is awesome because he's got a wealth of knowledge. But from a commercial standpoint, with the high profile jobs that we've done and just in Southern Colorado with kind of that smaller community atmosphere that you get, there's a lot of name recognition. So we maintain that Straightline Construction name down in Southern Colorado as well.
Totally. You get the best of both worlds, right? So it's basically just that signal of trust again, just being like,
Exactly.
we
And
really know
Ramjack's
what
nationwide, Central America. They've got, I think they're up to over 40 dealers and stuff that they use throughout the country.
Amazing. Well, Patrick, I think that wraps up all my questions for you. Is there anything else that we didn't talk about that you would like to?
No, I couldn't say enough good things about ArcSite. It's exceeded our expectations. Like I said, from when we first started looking for just a drafting program, it offered so much more. And we got really excited once we got it implemented. Our sales manager took the time and built in all of the different products so that we could actually do some quoting in the house. And then, like I said, we continue to work with the ArcSite team to to give us some additional enhancements that really help our business with giving us some new features on the maps. And they're always trying to improve the product. And I couldn't say enough good things about the team with ArcSite.